Hello, European and Australian friends, and welcome back to the ESC Kelp Eurovision podcast. My name is Matt, and I am your host. So, last time we looked at the semi final one running orders because we had both running orders released, and I talked a little bit about the running order, qualification chances, which countries benefit, and which countries might struggle based on the running order. And today we are going to be doing that as well, but for semi-final two. So I have my notes um for the countries in semi-final two with me, and I am going to use them to make sure that I don't forget to talk about anything. I basically just jot down some notes about things that I want to make sure that I talk about, so that I don't forget anything. And I've got them here in front of me. But we're just gonna sort of freewheel it, like we did last time, and see where we get to. So starting off semi-final two, the opening country is Australia, which is really interesting to me. This is an interesting slot for Australia, I would say. I think I was expecting something a bit later on because the song's got quite a tongue-in-cheek nature. It's got a lot of sort of innuendo lyrics, that sort of thing. And so I think for that reason I was expecting Ireland to open. I think there were some people that suggested Australia, but I think most people thought Ireland just because it seems very family friendly. But what that does probably tell us is that Australia is going to be bringing a family friendly show. I don't think the producers would put this on this early if it wasn't family friendly. It's also probably going to be quite impressive staging. I'm hoping and I'm thinking it is going to be that. I really want to see the ice cream truck from the music video on the stage. I think that would be great. And actually, I think it could well happen because this is being staged by Marvin Dietman, well known for being Colleen's husband of Austria last year. And he did Voyages, which Australia's at in 2023, and they had a cart on the stage. So I'm really hoping that that ice cream truck is going to be on the stage. And I'm feeling like it might be, and I think it's sort of going first, and what's coming after it in second, which we'll get onto in a minute, I think might suggest that there's something going on in the staging, and probably is, based on the music video at least, an ice cream truck. So when it comes to qualification, I guess there is a small chance this NQs because you've got Malta coming in the middle and then Finland at the end, and these are sort of similar tongue-in-cheek kind of songs. So I guess there's a chance that this is sort of lost going early and those take the votes. But I think it would be unlikely that this would NQ, and everything from my perspective, everything about this is pointing it to being popular, it being memorable, it getting the votes, and it qualifying. So that's what I would say for that. Now, really unfortunately, a country that I think might struggle to qualify now because of the running order is our death slot country, this year, which is in semi two, which is Montenegro, and this feels like a very cruel running order. They've just returned after I think 2022 was their last appearance. So they've just returned, and they get given the death slot. And I mean, Luxembourg. Granted, Luxembourg came back last year, and granted, it was like I think it was 31 years or 30 years, so it was a much longer time. But the producers put them last, and now to put Montenegro in the death slot just feels really cruel, to be honest. I'm assuming this will be simple staging because we saw simple staging in the national final and in the sort of showcase performance of the revamp. The staging actually looks really good, and I think they've done a good job with making it look expensive on what I'm assuming is a small budget. But that does suggest that Australia's doing quite a lot because I think if Montenegro had lots of stuff going on, then they wouldn't want to put those two back to back because it would be hard to get everything off and get more stuff on. So I think they'll just be getting the stuff off for Australia, which is why Montenegro probably second. The other thing that you've got to look at is the fact that this comes early on, which is obviously a problem in itself, but it's not impossible. But there is competition in this semi. There's more female ballads coming up. Greece, Georgia, and Israel, and this is different to them. This feels sort of darker, I think, both in the sort of aesthetics and the mood of the song. So it does stand out, but there is also another Balkan ballad, which is Serbia, and they perform second to last. So there does just feel like a lot of competition for me. For this to come in second, it would have to really stick in your mind to best those ones. So I'm worried. it's hard to see how this is going to manage to qualify. But I would say that Nina is a very talented vocalist, and I am clinging on to hope that she might defy the odds and she might do it. But I think if I'm being realistic, I'm struggling to see it at this point, and I'm annoyed that the producers have really sort of doomed them, if you like, by putting them in the death slot. And I also think that Ireland, who are in third, have been slightly doomed by their position. Third is obviously not a good slot. It's basically the death slot, to be honest. Um, so I think I am interested as to why this isn't opening the show. I think that probably suggests that the staging isn't going to be anything incredible. There's probably not a big rocket prop or a big dog or something. But I mean, who knows? Interestingly, this is Marvin Dietman who's doing this as well. Who's doing Australia, which we mentioned. But he also did quite famously Who the Hell is Edgar, which was Austria 2023. And that was a fun song. I suppose fun a bit like this one. And the staging ruined that song, ruined any chance it had of doing anything in the final. So I'm interested to see what Ireland's staging is going to look like, but I'm not optimistic based on this running order. And I think this sort of worry about staging and the running order is making me think that this might not qualify. I suppose its positives are that it's quite sweet and family friendly, and it's coming early enough on that any children watching might want to vote for it or might want their parents to vote for it. So it could still make it. It's got an audience. It's going to have appeal. It's very catchy, but I just think it's coming so early on. Is really a negative. For Ireland, and especially because I think its closest competitor is Luxembourg, who we'll get onto obviously quite a bit later. But Luxembourg coming much later is going to mean that they retain some like they're fresher in people's minds when the voting opens. So I would say Ireland are not dead, but they're in trouble based on the running order. We then have Latvia, who are performing fourth. I think the key thing about Latvia is this would stand out wherever it was put. It's completely unique, like nothing. It's a bit like Albania in semi-final one, just completely in a league of its own. It's entirely different to anything else, and that's a big positive. It will really stand out in that sense. And it's really high quality vocals, really high quality staging, assuming that the staging will be similar to the national final, which it should be because that was some of the best staging I think I've ever seen in anything Eurovision related. It's incredible, like blows my mind how good that Supernova staging is, and I hope they keep it. The running order slot is interesting because fourth has been actually a good slot for qualification recently. 3 out of the 4 songs, that's 75%, have qualified from slot 4 since the televote only semi-finals. And interestingly, the one that didn't make it was Latvia 2023, Southern Lights Aya, which is an amazing song. And that only missed out by 3 or 4. I think 3 points would have tied it, and 4 would have put it one above Serbia. So it's interesting that is Latvia, and I'm really hoping it's not going to be a situation like that again this year. But so I think Latvia stands out, and I think it particularly stands out being here with Ireland coming before, which is very sort of child friendly and sort of a bit cutesy and that kind of thing, and Armenia coming afterwards, which is quite shouty. And I'll get onto Armenia's in an interesting situation with the vocal style. So I do think Latvia stands out, and I'm really hoping it's going to qualify. But this stage, it's difficult because I feel like the song is a risk. But it just has to qualify. It's too high quality to not qualify, and so I'm really hoping that Latvia is going to qualify. I should stop talking about it because if you can't tell, I love Latvia so much, and that's why I'm so passionate about wanting it to qualify and hoping it will. And I think at the end of the day, it will. Maybe it could have come a bit later, but at least it's not second or third. I think that's the takeaway from the running order. I briefly mentioned Armenia. They're next in fifth. I think meh is the word that's coming to mind to describe this slot. I think they could have gone in the death slot, to be honest. So this is obviously better than that, but I still don't think it's an amazing running order for them. The vocals, interestingly, have seemed to be better in the pre-parties versus national final. I think there were lots of sound mixing problems in the national final. Um, but they're still going to be weaker, the vocals, this is, than Latvia, which is obviously before, Austria, which is coming after. We've then got the UK, we've got all sorts of Greece, Lithuania, these amazing run of vocals, and Armenia in the middle, which just stands out as being very vocally and sonically different, which I suppose is a good thing in terms of votes, but also it might sound weak vocally, and it might be accentuated by the songs that are around it, and so people might not like that and they might not vote for it. So I am thinking that that could be an issue, but it does stand out, which is going to help. There are friends in the semi, so qualifying is very possible for Armenia. You'd probably say it's sitting on the edge at the moment, I think, and so the staging and the vocals are going to make the difference here. It needs to be pretty vocally on point, is what I would say, in order to make it, because I do think it is. While the running order isn't terrible in the sense that fifth isn't a rubbish slot and it's not in the death slot and it's not in third, but where it's been placed in the running order, surrounded by all these incredible vocalists, could really show some slight cracks in Armenia's vocals, and that could be an issue. Where there won't be an issue though for vocals or qualifying is Austria coming up next that's the sixth, I believe. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, they're obviously one of the favourites to win the whole thing, so it makes sense to have them in later in the half. Like Sweden in semi-final 1, you don't want them too early, because they're going to be one of the main attractions for people watching the semi-final. So coming in sixth is probably quite expected. This will qualify with absolute ease. I think it's probably going to upstage Armenia, like I was mentioning, which is never going to be good for Armenia, and is probably something that the Armenian delegation, should start worrying about, is what I would say about that. But Austria, easy qualification, would have qualified from anywhere. What it does in the final is going to be very interesting, is what I would say. We then go from very good vocals to more very good vocals, because it's the UK, where I'm from, if you can't tell by the accent. This is our first automatic qualifier of the semi, obviously, so there's not much to say because it doesn't need to qualify. The main thing is just to reiterate, I think, the point about it being a very strong vocal run with Latvia, Austria, the UK, and then we've got Greece and Lithuania, which we're going to talk about next. So with Armenia being in there, it stands out as a bit of a weaker link vocally. But in terms of the UK, I think the vocals are going to be very good. It stands out in the semi, actually. It's very different. It stands out in the whole out of the whole 37 countries. It's very unique in that sense. And I am curious to see the staging, because I am expecting something quite impressive. I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but it'll be very nice to see that. And we mentioned Greece, they come next. I suppose they're seventh, because we don't really count the UK as being the seventh. So Greece would be classed as seventh. I think this is a pretty good slot for Greece. I think some people might disagree with that, but obviously this is near the end of the first half, and they couldn't really be put much better than that, because the only other place where you could probably put a ballad is probably second or third or maybe fourth, I would say. So obviously it's good that they've avoided the death slot, because that may have caused problems, and especially those problems, it would be worse because we don't know about the staging. And that's why we can't really say that Greece will definitely qualify, because even though it's a good, I think, a good running order slot anyway, because of those concerns about the staging, it wasn't good in the national final. It's slightly worrying, and I think we can't fully say yet whether Greece will qualify or not, without knowing what the staging will look like. So I would say that the running order is helping them, but they need to now raise their game and get to the level that they need to be at in order to qualify. Qualification for me is guaranteed for our country in eighth, which is Lithuania, ending off the first half. This is an amazing slot for them. Like I was talking about with Latvia, this is so different in terms of its sound. It stands out. It stands out both with it being entirely sort of in its own genre, but also it's very good staging, amazing vocals. It's part of that amazing vocal streak that we we're talking about. Lots of people are going to vote for this because it's so unique. And obviously it's a great draw, running order draw in the semi. There's plenty of countries with diaspora voting in this semi. It is an easy peasy qualification, and anyone saying it is not is wrong. I'm telling you here first, Lithuania is qualifying with ease, absolute ease. So don't worry if you love this song like me and you don't think it's going to qualify, because it is. I'm telling you now. And if I'm wrong, then I'll eat a hat, because there's no way it doesn't qualify. Also something that is almost certainly going to qualify is Malta, who are kicking off the second half. Now, I think this is quite a cruel running order, quite a cruel draw for Malta, because they've had some rubbish slots recently. Loop, which was last year, was first. The Busker, that with Dance Iron Party, I think that's what it's called. In 2023, I think they were second or third. They performed, so obviously these are quite bad slots, quite early slots. So they draw second half this year with their best chance at qualification in recent years, and then they get put in as early as possible in that second half. Now, I sort of understand why, because you've got these three songs with a similar sort of theme, which is Australia, Malta, and Finland, and they've been spaced apart as equally as possible in first, 9th, and 16th. So I understand why they're here, but it does just feel a bit cruel to Malta. And obviously because they've been struggling to qualify with the televote, it sort of adds to that cruelty. But they'll be fine, I think. Um, Obviously, there's a chance that the joke doesn't land and Malta doesn't like it, and doesn't like it. What am I trying to say? Malta doesn't make it to the final, and then what I was trying to say is they do struggle with the televote. The televote doesn't seem to like Malta's song. That's what I was trying to say. But I think this joke, well, not even a joke, but the song has spread so far. It's been on like news in loads of countries. It's on TikTok. Non-Eurovision fans know about this. So I think it has gone too far for it not to qualify, and it should make the final. Probably fourth or fifth, if I had to guess. But really, the most important thing is that it's going to make the final, and I'm really excited to see the staging, because that will really help this get to the final. The running order sort of hasn't helped, and it hasn't really made it worse. The staging is what is going to take it there. I want it to be crazy. I want it to be fun. I want them to be bouncing on the balls like in the national final, but I want them to polish some bits up. Maybe they're going to have a costume reveal. I don't know. But I actually think that Malta does a good job with staging. They've had some really... Their staging last year was really good. The year before, I also thought was really good. 2021, I thought was pretty good staging. So I no concerned about Malta. I think they're going to qualify. Running order hasn't helped them, but it hasn't made it worse. Those are the key takeaways. And then we go next to Georgia, which, I mean, this is a bit of a difficult one because, well, no, it's not a difficult one, actually. It's the opposite of a difficult one, because this was probably DOA before we got the running orders, but after the running orders, it is definitely DOA. You're going to have people riding the high of Malta, and then we've got France coming afterwards, which is an automatic qualifier, and France just outshines Georgia in every aspect. Maybe you could have argued that Georgia would have stood out as a ballad coming after Malta, and then Denmark after France. So if France hadn't been there, you could have said, oh well, it's a ballad amongst this crazy upbeat stuff. But you've got France afterwards, and France is basically just showing Georgia how to do a ballad and do it well. So there's no way Georgia qualifies, and I can't really say anything more about that because it is so dead on arrival. And it's sad because Georgia obviously had a long non-qualification streak. They broke that last year with Firefighter, and they're going straight back to non-qualification. And I think there's probably some doubt as to whether they'll even be in the contest next year. So, I mean, only time will tell, but this is not going to be two qualifications in a row, and the running order has made that even worse for them. I think it's actually the producers basically giving up on Georgia at that point with this running order. We mentioned France coming after, destroying Georgia's chances. Obviously, another automatic qualifier, not much to say about this for that reason, because it's guaranteed to qualify. Well, it has qualified for the final, other than just the fact that this is so bad for Georgia. And also, I am, as with all the automatic qualifiers, well, as with all the entries, to be fair, I am interested to see the staging for France, because this is gonna determine whether it could win or not. I think it needs to be quite intimate. tight camera angles, nice lighting, and something that's happened in the pre-parties is English lyrics behind Luann when she performs, and I think that really helps. If they can do that in a really in an effective way, because there's a chance it looks a bit tacky. I don't think it does look tacky in the pre-parties actually. If they can do this in the right way, then I'm really hopeful for France, and I think this is going to be really effective. So we'll see if it can win. I actually do think it's got a pretty good chance of winning, but we'll probably talk about that another time because obviously we're focused on semi-final 2. I'll just have a quick drink. Because talking about all these entries is thirsty work. Then we've got Denmark, which, just as a side note, Sissel is killing the pre-parties. She's very well. There's this trio of Sissel, JJ, and Kyla Alessandro, and they're a really funny trio. And they are basically making this pre-party season. So shout out to them. But Denmark, in terms of the draw, running order draw, it feels quite average to me. A little bit later, or I guess even closing the show, which this could have done, may have given them the sort of boost they need to get over the line, because I do think this has potential. There's been some recent sort of news articles and discussion about the changes they made to the staging, and it does sound promising to me. I think there's something to do with like a cloth and changing colour and outfit changes, which does sound really good. It obviously needed a huge uplift from the national final performance of staging to give this a shot to qualify. But it does make you wonder with respect to running order, is it really that impressive? Because this was a candidate, I would say, to close a show, and it's not, so does that mean it's not good enough to close a show for staging? But what I would say on that is that maybe Finland was just, it was always known Finland would close a show because they already had it in place and the producers knew what it was going to look like. Obviously, there'll be some small changes, but the producers knew what this was going to look like. They could see it. Yes, we want this to close the show, and that's why maybe Denmark would be worthy to close the show. But it just, Finland was there and they could rely on Finland, so that might be why they chose Finland. Because obviously Finland is a bit more reliable than Denmark. So, but in terms of the draw, what I would say is it's could have been better for Denmark, but it's not ruined them. It's not like they're not going to qualify because of running order. I am really hopeful that Denmark are going to get there. I'm hoping it's going to be enough. I think sort of Luxembourg, Serbia, or closing the show would obviously be more beneficial, because I do think you have that small risk that you've got Czechia, Luxembourg, Germany as an automatic qualifier, and then Finland finishing the show. These are all quite upbeat songs, quite similar sort of. They're not necessarily similar to Denmark in the style or genre of the song, but in that sort of upbeat, get people moving, people are going to enjoy this sort of thing. So I would say that Denmark have not been screwed over or anything like that, but they also haven't really been helped. So it is going to come down to how much Denmark want it and how much they put into the staging. So I am really excited, actually. Czechia, we mentioned, is coming up there next, which I think is 12th slot, is it? I believe. I'd say this is a pretty good draw for Czechia. It's a unique song in the semi-final anyway. It's very high quality entry, so it would qualify easily, I think. And Czechia is good at staging. That I don't have any worries. I'm curious to see what this will look like. So yeah, they've done well with the running order. They were going to qualify anyway, I think. Short of a disaster. So they can be pleased with this running order. I'm also interested around sort of props and ad breaks, because I'm thinking somewhere around this area there's an ad break, because I think Denmark, I mentioned, seems to have some sort of props. Czechia could well have props. Luxembourg, I think, are upgrading the performance from the national final. They could easily have props. So I'm very curious to see what this is going to look like in the final product. Luxembourg we mentioned a few times now. They are next, and that is the 13th song, I believe, not including automatic qualifiers. Luxembourg are definitely helped by the draw. they were last year, cup performing last. So Montenegro gets screwed over, and Luxembourg get helped to 2 years in a row. But I think Luxembourg would have qualified last year anyway. But that doesn't matter because we're talking about this year. So Luxembourg are helped by the draw, and they've got a good chance now. I think they're sort of sitting around that borderline, along with, I guess, Armenia, who we said, Denmark probably on that borderline. I'm just trying to see if there's anyone else in my notes who I think is probably borderline. Maybe Ireland, but I think they're a little bit off, but I think they're more likely to non-qualify. So we've got a few countries here sort of all vying for these spots. So it is significant that Luxembourg is the latest of those to perform. That's obviously good for them. This is a close and competitive semi, so going quite late is obviously going to be beneficial in trying to push them over that line. And as I mentioned with Ireland, at the start, this is really harmful to Ireland, Luxembourg being this late, because I do think they are sort of going into that similar niche of sort of being quite playful and child friendly, but I think Luxembourg is a little bit more adult about it. And obviously coming later, they are just going to be fresher in the mind of people voting. So I do think Luxembourg has the edge over Ireland, and I think coming so late in the running order is Luxembourg coming so late in the running order, that is what is pushing Ireland towards non-qualifying. So bad for Ireland, good for Luxembourg, and potentially bad for the likes of Denmark, who I think are sort of, and Armenia, who I think are competing with Luxembourg for this last slot. Luxembourg have got a chance to make the final for the second year in a row and maintain their 100% qualification record, which obviously is not as impressive as Ukraine's because they've only been one, but I guess they would like to maintain 100%. We then have Israel in slot 14. This is the same slot as last year for them. I'm assuming that is so that the producers can put them early in the final again and justify that by saying we put you late in the semi. But obviously that's similar to Ukraine in semi-final 1. But obviously that is also dependent on Israel drawing first half or producer's choice, assuming producer's choice is coming back in the draw for the final. This would qualify from any slot in the semi for obvious reasons, and I'm assuming it will probably win the semi. It's definitely between Israel and Finland, so those two countries will be first and second. We then have the final automatic qualifier, which is Germany. There's obviously not loads to say because they don't need to qualify. They could be put anywhere. It doesn't make a difference in the running order. Obviously, they're sort of used as a tool to break things up. I'm curious to see how this will be staged and how the vocals will sound, because that is what is gonna make or break how this is gonna do in the final. I have noticed today. I've read that Tina, I believe that's how you say her name, who's obviously the vocalist from the duo for Germany. They're not going to the London pre-party now because she's been ill and she needs to recover, which is definitely the right thing to do. Because there's been a few nerves around the performance lately, and she's going to need to be at her full potential for Eurovision. So the other thing to say is this is after Israel and before Serbia, which are two ballads, two quite slow ballads as well. They're not the most exciting ballads. Israel and Serbia. There's definitely outshone by like Montenegro, for example, which is a really powerful and moving ballad, I would say. So it's a shame that's in the death slot. But Germany is that bit of energy that I think we really need at this stage in the semi. Between Israel and Serbia. Serbia, who we've been talking about. Now, like Croatia in semi-final 1, this is a very interesting draw for Serbia, in my opinion. And they've received very similar treatment to Croatia, in the sense that they've been given a lifeline and they now have a chance to qualify, and they probably didn't, or at least I wouldn't have said they had going like before the draw. It really does seem like the EBU wants some ex-Yugo representation in the final. They don't want any risk of withdrawals, which I understand. But could we not have tried to do that by giving like Montenegro like as late as possible in the first half? Because it's definitely better than Serbia. So I don't know. Then you could have just dumped Serbia wherever. I'm not a big fan of Serbia. So you can't rule them out as a qualifier. I guess I would have said they're more likely to non-qualify before the running order, but I think maybe now you could argue they're sitting around the border, so with sort of Luxembourg and Denmark. But I just think Luxembourg, Denmark, Armenia are better than Serbia, so um, I'd say this is going to come 8 to 12. And Serbia has some good countries for diaspora in the semi, I think. I know Austria usually give them points. There's probably more. Obviously, Montenegro is probably giving them 12. But interestingly, if you think about Serbia's recent entries, 2023 Luke Black and last year Teodora both came 10th in the semi, and those were more interesting. Or last year it was an amazing song. Those were better packages than this, and they only got 10th. And I think they were both in the sort of quite competitive semi-finals, if I recall. And this is also a competitive semi-final. So while it's got a much better deal with the running order than those two songs I mentioned, I'm just not convinced that this feels like it doesn't deserve to qualify if those two only got 10th. Although I didn't like Luke Black's song, but I can appreciate that it was very artistic and whatnot. So you get the point I'm making. Serbia has a chance to qualify because of the running order, and it is only because of the running order. If the running order wasn't like this, then I don't think we'd be having the same conversation. Which brings us on to Finland, our show closer. This is what basically everyone, myself included, was expecting. It wasn't a case of Cyprus in semi-final 1, which people just didn't think. Obviously, we've seen the national final performance. There'll probably be some changes for Eurovision, but I think it'll be quite similar. That performance felt like a rock concert. It was amazing. It was electric. I would have loved to have been there to experience that, actually. And that's what you want the show close to be. The producers want that excitement and it to feel grand and like it's almost like everything was a lead up to Erica, because it's sort of got that show closer, that concert feeling. This was a guaranteed qualify wherever it had gone, obviously, but going last gives it a boost it didn't need. This could win the semi, as I was talking about. I'm assuming it'll be Israel based on sort of the high televote they got last year, but so this would come second, but this could definitely come first depending on how that televote plays out. So really, there's not much to say about Finland because we're all expecting it to close a show, and we all know it's going to qualify, and we all know it's going to come either first or second in the semi. So it's a locked qualifier, and the running order has only guaranteed that even further. It was already guaranteed, and now it's guaranteed even more. But that does bring us to the end of this semi-final, which does mean it's time for me to say goodbye. There will be another episode at some point discussing whatever comes to mind. Obviously, the Eurovision world is constantly developing. There's pre-parties going on at the moment, so there might be stuff to talk about with that. But we will discuss it all and get round to it very soon. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will join me in another podcast very soon. Goodbye.